We're talking this morning about this new federal regulation that could be a real hindrance to businesses in North Carolina. I think since the McCrory administration has taken over in Raleigh, if you ask people who've dealt with the department known as DENER, that there has been a significant change in the way that this department works with businesses. I know the original secretary, John Scavarla, who is now have moved over to the Commerce Department, used to talk about businesses being the customers of the state. And now, since Scavarla's moved on, Secretary Vaart, Donald Vaart, has taken over DENER and carried on that same mantra of how he's dealing with businesses. But there is a lot of concern right now about these new EPA regulations, the Clean Energy Act from the Obama administration, and we wanted to get the Secretary on to talk about how that could be harmful to North Carolina businesses and maybe another case of federal overregulation. On the telephone now with us from Raleigh is Secretary Donald Vaart, the Secretary of North Carolina's Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Mr. Secretary, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Talk about this clean power plan that the federal government now wants to shove down our throats. How is that going to affect North Carolina, and what's your opinion of it?
Well, unfortunately, I think the administration certainly wanted some sort of legislation, if you remember a while back, some sort of legislation that sought to regulate or legislate against greenhouse gases. They were unsuccessful. Congress overwhelmingly opposed that. And so what they embarked upon was an attempt to use the Clean Air Act to get the kind of regulation they were looking for. And of course, there are two aspects of this rule. There's a legal problem that, in fact, paradoxically, our position opposing the EPA is identical to a position that a lot of environmental groups took back in 2008 when the Bush administration tried to do something similar, albeit at a lower level, using the same part of the Clean Air Act. So it's funny that we're now, they don't remember that when I ask them, but there is that aspect. But there's also the practical issue, and the practical issue is that this is essentially a federal takeover of the world's greatest electricity generating system. What they're seeking to do is to require states to dispatch electricity based on carbon dioxide emissions rather than on cost. And the funny thing is that North Carolina has achieved great reductions in pollutants and in GHGs, in carbon dioxide, simply because of actions we've taken and because of the great revolution that we've experienced in natural gas production.
Let me play the devil's advocate with you on this. Let's say I'm an environmentalist, which I'm clearly not, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, North Carolina needs to participate in this. We need to encourage this because we need to do everything we can to protect the environment. And, it's been clear that there have been some communities that have not done a great job policing themselves when it comes to clean air. How would you respond to an environmentalist who would say that to you?
Right. And the funny thing about it is that, President Obama wanted to see a 30% reduction in GHGs from a 2005 baseline. We are on track to do that. In fact, Senator Kay Hagan, who is certainly not renowned for being anti-environment, she was concerned about the same practical issue, which is because North Carolina already spent $6 billion on cleaning up our act from going back to 2005. The clean air rule that's come out uses a 2012 baseline. And Senator Hagan made the point that we're making right now, which is by using a 2012 baseline, the EPA is penalizing us and making us go far beyond other states in terms of cleaning up where we are. So now, as far as the environment's concerned, on the one hand, we're getting the collateral benefits of cleaning up sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide. All that's going on right now, and we are, in fact, North Carolina is now in compliance with all national ambient air quality standards throughout the state, which is the first time we've achieved that in almost 20 years. So we're getting those collateral benefits. And as far as the climate change, Henry, as far as the global warming, the EPA themselves have admitted that this action will do extremely little, in fact, insignificant improvement on climate change. So, I don't think there is an environmental issue here. We're already ahead of the game, but there are severe cost issues and fairness issues.
So what you're saying is North Carolina doesn't need the federal government, don't need this Clean Power Act to come in. We're doing it already. In fact, isn't it true, Mr. Secretary, that we've had a significant reduction in environmental problems in the last few years?
Absolutely, and really that's the whole issue here. The EPA, I think, is more interested in controlling carbon dioxide or controlling our electricity generating system than they are making any kind of improvements. When asked in front of Congress, in front of a committee of Congress, the head of the EPA admitted there was very little effect on climate change. But what she wanted to say is that from a moral position, we'll be able to sit down with China and India and ask for reductions from them in the future if we show this kind of resolve. And I'm not convinced that's the reason we should. As the head of DENER, I'm not in that business. I'm in the business of protecting the environment.
If you're just joining us, this is Secretary Donald Vaart. He is the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Natural Resources in Governor McCrory's cabinet. If this Clean Power Act were to be enacted and became law in North Carolina, what would it cost us? Who would pay?
Well, first of all, if it becomes a requirement, then the ratepayers pay. The cost estimates are all over the place, but it's looking like typically you're looking at 20% increases on an average household.
And we just got the Duke Power deal done down here in Eastern North Carolina.
That's right.
We're just now getting a little bit of a break in what has been power bills that are way too high.
That's right.
And I'm not sure the average consumer realizes that if this EPA thing goes through, that all that's going to get wiped out by that, and your electric rates are going to go back up again.
Well, and the really unfortunate thing is that, as I said earlier, left to our own control, we've spent the money, we're making the improvements, and you're seeing those. It's true the rates have gone up somewhat, but we're on track now to meet significant reductions. What this is saying, forget it, North Carolina. We're not really interested in what you did before 2012. Our neighboring states will be able to spend the kind of money we've already spent and get complete compliance with with what I call the carbon control plan. It's a federal overreach, and it's an attempt to take over what I said, the world's greatest electricity generating system.
I appreciate you letting us know about it. Here's the interesting thing, and of course, people will say that I'm playing politics here, but let's be honest. Once again, we've got a situation here where you've got the McCrory administration fighting the federal government, and now Attorney General Roy Cooper, who ought to join you in that fight, instead has now sent a letter to the legislature pretty much endorsing this whole Clean Power Act thing that Obama wants to enact down here.
Well, and the politics of it is only insofar as Attorney General, he needs to be North Carolina's attorney, but obviously he can have his opinions. We don't happen to agree with them. Again, this is not especially partisan. Senator Kay Hagan had the same concerns we had. So I think that everybody has to make their own decision. North Carolina's got the most efficient coal fleet in the nation. We are strong in our renewables. We have converted a lot of the inefficient coal units to natural gas. We're doing what needs to be done to clean up our power sector. We don't need the federal government telling us how to do it.
Interesting. Kay Hagan's on board. Some of the leading environmental organizations are actually on board with you, are they not? And,
Well,
and yet the Attorney General of North Carolina lining up with Obama on this.
There certainly are folks all across on the environmental side. Certainly, they agree with our legal positions. They've taken those positions in the past, and it's just it's a kind of a shame that North Carolina, having gotten out in front of this over the past years, is essentially now being told, look, you've got to make your Prius more efficient, and your neighboring states are driving an old '72 Cadillac.
That's a good analogy. Good stuff. Anything else on this that I haven't asked you that you want to mention to our listeners this morning?
No, I think you've got it. This is not the only set of rules that we at DENER are opposing the EPA on. There's also a very significant impact to agricultural folks in the waters of the United States rule that just came out a couple of months ago. We filed suit against that. That would be a huge overreach, especially in your area, Henry. Essentially, everything east of 95 would become regulated under federal law, and they like to pretend like there's some sort of an exemption for farmers, but the farming industry, the agricultural industry, knows better that that's an illusory exemption, and this kind of redefinition of waters of the United States will make a dramatic impact on the values of farms in North Carolina. So we're opposing that as well.
Well, people can say it's political or whatever they want to say, but the realities of it are that, we owe you a debt of gratitude, and Governor McCrory, for taking the position that you're taking against the federal government on these things. We've had a government in North Carolina in the past that would just line right up and go right along with the federal government on these things, particularly a guy like Obama. And, we at this moment in time, at least, we have some folks in Raleigh that will fight those kind of overreaches by the federal government. And I think we've seen time and time again that Obama's administration is about federal overreach and kind of changing the lives of a lot of people. Here's something that's going to hit every one of us in the pocketbook if we're not paying attention.
Well, thank you for those words. Let's just understand, though, that our position we're taking is based on what we know is right for the environment, what we've already done to protect the environment, and to also protect the economic development of this state. Now, the motivations of the President Obama's EPA, that's left to conjecture, but we're looking out for the environment.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get Roy Cooper on to ask him, what's your position on this and why? Why are you lining up with the federal government on this? North Carolina's done a great job, obviously, in reducing greenhouse gases, and once again, we're going to be, we're going to fall prey to a lefty agenda if we're not careful here, and it's going to hurt North Carolina consumers, and on top of that, we need to thank you for the work that you and the governor have done on cleaning up the environment. We appreciate all that you do in that area, and it's great to hear from you. We appreciate you being on. We were up in Raleigh a couple weeks ago again. Your folks were great to work with up at DENER up there at the Science Museum. So thanks for all of that, and it's great to talk to you again this morning, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thanks, Henry. Thanks again for having me on.
Okay, Secretary Don Vaart, the Secretary of Department of Natural Environment and Natural Resources in Raleigh.